actually with a British accent, and she was covering like economic story. It was very relaxing. She was adorable. Sandra, right there. Greg from BJ's, and then Mike was right here. You're right. And yeah, I'm using it. It took all that time to make it look so good. Yeah. No, that's why I like it. I want a real picture.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello, hello? Okay.
Everybody need a wipe out?
You need a wipe? Were you good?
Very good. Well done, man. Yeah.
John, how are you?
Good, what's going on, man? Same old, same old. So you yesterday at the Mayor's News Conference?
That was awesome, wasn't it?
Yeah, watch you on the close circuit. Why doesn't anybody ask the mayor, if he's got 60 million dollars, why is not making get away with it?
Right.
Doesn't that kind of give away or a big group money?
Got it? Everybody got it? Hold on a second. Good. Mic check for Gloria Allred, presser in Atlanta, Marietta at the Radisson Hotel. Mic check for Gloria Allred, presser here in Atlanta, Georgia, kicking off shortly. Good.
Good afternoon, and thank you for watching Fox 5 Live. Here from the Fox 5 Atlanta studios, I'm Will Nunley. In just a few moments, we are anticipating this news conference from downtown Atlanta. Attorney Gloria Allred to have a news conference to describe what she says are new allegations of violence in the NFL and NFL families. We'll bring this, of course, to you live as it happens. We're expected to begin about 5 minutes away from the scheduled news conference start time. 5 minutes away. You're watching Fox 5 Live.
So it's a slow, if we can listen to what they have to say, it's not a marathon. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Keep your sense of level. You can't laugh. What's the fun? I was in the hospital.
You've had a great outlook here.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I was in the hospital. Had the operation done. My wife rushes me to the ER. So we didn't come to get paperwork and things. So the caseworker of the hospital walks in. Very apologetic. She said, I got to get some information. We didn't get a chance to check you. I said, that's fine. Where do I go? So she asked me name, age, address, who you live with, places where you are. She goes, now how tall are you? I said, well, depends. My left side is 6 feet, and my right side is about 5'5". And then she called me. I said, no, you're allowed to laugh. Yeah, okay. I mean, it's not like I know what's going on.
Right. I'm very aware.
Yeah, it's not like you can sit down and go, oh my God. Keep your sense of humor.
You get low before you especially if you got no bandwidth here.
How many more you think?
Thank you.
You good?
That's fine. No. You all right, Matt?
Good afternoon again from the Fox 5 Live channel, where we are anticipating the Gloria Allred news conference here live from downtown Atlanta. It is now 3 o'clock, and any moment now we're expecting the press conference to get underway. Be sure to tweet your friends and let them know that you're watching today's event live on the Fox 5 Live channel. You're watching Fox 5 live coverage as we're anticipating a Gloria Allred news conference from downtown Atlanta. She called this news conference to discuss what she calls two individuals, quote, who allege that they or a family member were victims of violence and abuse by an NFL player, end quote. Allred also represents the Women's Equal Rights Legal Defense and Education Fund, and she is here appearing today as part of that organization as well. As part of today's event, she says, quote, the victims will discuss how the NFL and Commissioner Goodell failed them, end quote. Allred is expected to discuss changes that Goodell needs to make in order to ensure, quote, a process that is fair to victims. So that's a little background of what we are expected to see here. Again, momentarily, you're looking at live images from downtown Atlanta, and you're watching Fox 5 Live. And a good afternoon to those of you joining us on the Fox 5 Atlanta YouTube page, watching this live pictures from downtown Atlanta as we are awaiting the Gloria Allred news conference. Cameras here in position as we're expecting her to come out at any moment now to discuss what she calls new allegations against NFL violence. You're watching Fox 5 Live.
Thank you very much for coming today. Copies of our statements are being handed out to you. I'm attorney Gloria Allred, and I'll be making a statement. And then Christina Spivey, who is next to me, will be making a statement. And after her, Mr. Clarence Watley will be making a statement, and then we'll be happy to take some questions. I'm here today with Christina Spivey and Clarence Watley. Christina alleges that she reported to NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell that an NFL Denver Bronco football player had committed an act of violence against her while she and the player's girlfriend, Rashida Watley, were sitting in Christina's mother's car. Christina stated that Goodall said that he would investigate the allegation and get back to her. She never heard from him again. Clarence Whatley is the father of Rashida Whatley. He alleges that he also contacted NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell by sending him a letter on August 22, 2008. In the letter, Mr. Whatley alleged that Commissioner Goodell had been aware of numerous allegations, including police reports, that an NFL player had been abusing his girlfriend. Mr. Whatley complained that despite these allegations, that Commissioner Goodell had never bothered to conduct an investigation and had not interviewed the alleged victim, Mr. Whatley's daughter, or any witness or member of the alleged victim's family. Mr. Whatley never received a response to his letter. Instead, 6 days later, the NFL reduced the suspension it imposed on the NFL player against whom the allegations were made. This failure by the NFL and Commissioner Goodell to conduct a full, fair, and timely investigation of serious allegations against an NFL player could lead victims, their families, and members of the public to conclude that the NFL is only interested in preserving its own image and brand and cares little about violence against women and children. Commissioner Goodell talks frequently about the NFL family. He appears to suggest that NFL players, wives, children, and significant others are part of this family. If that is the case, then it appears that the NFL is treating certain members of the family as though they are more important than others. He seems to give greater support to the person considered the most valuable asset to the NFL. That means that men are considered to be of more value to the NFL than women and children, who are also part of the NFL family. This may account for the inadequate investigations and light or non-existent punishments imposed on players as a result of the NFL's, quote, investigations, end quote. The NFL is careful to afford due process to its players, but little or no due process to the women and to the children who are alleged to be victims of violence by those players. It is time for the sham investigations to end. I propose that the NFL adopt a new process for its investigation. It could use as a model the hearing process mandated by Title IX for hearings by colleges when students make allegations of rape or sexual assault on campus. Under the law and as mandated by the Office of Civil Rights, victims as well as the accused must be afforded due process, and the hearing must be conducted even if there is no arrest or criminal prosecution, and even if there's an acquittal in a criminal case. It is long overdue for the NFL to adopt a fair hearing process. Unless they do, victims of violence by NFL players will continue to be treated as second-class citizens who can be ignored or sidelined. It is a good first step that the NFL has hired and is paying for women who have experience in the field of sexual assault and domestic violence. However, unless the NFL establishes a fair hearing process that includes and does not exclude witnesses and victims, the public and victims can have no confidence in the NFL and its public relations and face-saving efforts to persuade the public that it really cares about victims. Christina and Clarence are very brave to speak out publicly about this issue. They have been disappointed for many years on the NFL because they felt that the NFL had turned its back on victims. This is a new day, however. Christina and Clarence are now pioneers in the NFL victims' rights movement for meaningful change. Today, I am sending a letter to Commissioner Goodell with our suggestions for change. In order for a batterer to change his behavior, he must fully acknowledge what he's done wrong, ask for forgiveness from those whom he has wronged, and then get counseling and support to change his behavior. Although I don't believe the NFL commissioner is a batterer, I think that the NFL commissioner should adopt a similar plan. First, he should admit and take responsibility for inadequate NFL investigations in the past. Second, he should apologize to victims. 3, he should ask them for their forgiveness. 4th, He should make a plan for meaningful investigations in the future. And fifth, he should execute that plan. Is the NFL really committed to change and not just committed to damage control of its brand? We look forward to the NFL's response. And now I would like to introduce Ms. Christina Spivey. Would you like to change places with me, Christina?
My experience with the NFL, as well as Roger Goodell, has been very poor, to say the least. Sadly, the encounter that I had with Mr. Goodell was due to many unfortunate incidences that took place with an NFL player. In or about 2002, I was introduced to a very handsome and charming young boy through my best friend, Rashida Watley. This boy seemed to have a good head on his shoulders, since he managed to stay out of trouble and pursue his dream of becoming a football player. While they did not date at that time, by 2005, Brandon Marshall would become Rashida's very serious boyfriend. So much so that she decided to pick up and move to Florida to be with him. I was not too far behind. I would visit them often, and we shared many fun times together. In April 2006, Rashida, her family, Brandon, his family, and I shared one of his greatest moments in life. He was accepted into the draft. While he did not go until the 4th round, we were very proud of how far he had come and how his hard work truly paid off. In the wee hours of June 17, 2006, I received the very first of what seemed like 100 calls from Rashida, crying on the other end of the line. She told me that she was hiding in the bushes from Brandon, who had allegedly punched her in the face. While I was not present to confirm or deny the incident, I sent her a plane ticket to get home that very same morning. I pulled up to the airport, nervous, scared, and confused. I did not want to believe that Brandon would ever harm Rashida. My doubt quickly faded when I saw her walk out of the airport. She had blood in her severely swollen lips. Her hair was disheveled. There were tears running down her face. And puffy eyes of what I thought were from crying. It was not until later that day that the color of her beautiful face and her sweet eyes would overcome with black shadowing. I cannot go into detail with every incident. There are too many to count. However, I became a direct victim of Brandon Marshall on June 8, 2007. I was awakened by a call from Rashida. I could hear Brandon in the background yelling at her. I immediately jumped into the car and drove to their condo in downtown Atlanta. When I arrived, Rashida was outside with her hair again disheveled and a gaping wound to her thigh. It was bleeding profusely. I told her that she needed to go to the hospital. She seemed hesitant, but I was ready to end the mischief once and for all. I called the police to have Brandon arrested. In many other incidents, he would always flee the scene. I did not want that to happen again. While speaking to the emergency dispatcher and awaiting the arrival of the police, we saw Brandon get into his vehicle. He drove up behind us and proceeded to ram the back of my car, reversing and pulling forward to hit us a second and third time. After ramming my vehicle, Brandon exited his car and located a boulder of cement. Once he retrieved the cement, he threw it into the passenger side of the front door where Rashida was sitting. He demanded she get out of the car. I was in fear for her and my safety. Brandon finally jumped in his car and drove away once again before the police arrived, 12 minutes after my initial call. On March 5th, 2008, I went to rescue Rashida Watley from Brandon Marshall once again. After arriving to the condo they shared, Brandon had my vehicle towed from the property. I later drove Rashida to the Fulton County Courthouse, and we both filed temporary restraining orders against Brandon. A criminal warrant was issued. That same day, Brandon began circling the property in his vehicle. After numerous sights of Brandon, I called Roger Goodell to see if he could speak some sense into Brandon. Mr. Goodell told me that he would look into the incident. A few weeks later, I emailed him with the same concerns. I never received a call from him or the NFL as a victim regarding my fear and concerns. A few months after, the NFL stated that Brandon Marshall would get a 3-game suspension. However, it was reduced to a 1-day suspension by the time the season began. Roger Goodell and the NFL have failed me as a victim. I only hope that they take domestic violence more serious now. How many women will have to die or pass on the abuse from themselves to their children, who will either become victims of the abuse, victims themselves, or perpetrators? In 2007, Commissioner Goodell called Michael Vick's acts against animals reprehensible and suspended Vick indefinitely. Does that mean that women's lives, safety, and worth are less than those of dogs? Thank you.
I am the father of Rashida Watley.
Rashida is a former girlfriend of NFL football player Brandon Marshall. On August 22nd, 2008, I wrote and sent a lengthy letter to the NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell. In that letter, I told Commissioner Goodell that Rashida had for the past 3 years been physically, verbally, and mentally abused by Brandon Marshall since his senior year at UCF. Rashida has always been an independent young lady. She moved out of our home when she was at the age of 17, got a job, went to school, and paid for her own apartment, furniture, car, and anything else she needed. She was always self-sufficient and asked nothing of me or any other family member. She relinquished all of this and more when Brandon Marshall decided it was time to have Rashida in his life. Brandon Marshall had been pursuing her and stating that he was going to marry her since the 8th grade. In my letter to Commissioner Goodell, I told him that I wanted to express my feelings and distress and how disappointed I was in the way the Denver Broncos had handled this situation since Brandon Marshall drafted into the Broncos organization. The Denver Broncos, by their own admission during the draft, stated that Brandon Marshall had maturity issues. The Denver Broncos had knowledge of Brandon Marshall's abusive behavior towards our daughter for over 2.5 years. In fact, I was contacted by the staff member of Denver Broncos over 1.5 years ago about an abusive indictment incident by Brandon against our daughter, Rashida, an incident that I had no knowledge of. I was asked by the staff member to give Mr. Marshall another chance, that he would be able to change. He did. He became more abusive. I told Commissioner Goodell that I had been in contact with the Broncos staff throughout this whole nasty affair in hopes that the Broncos would step in and help our daughter in this situation and give Mr. Marshall some type of counseling, advice, whatever would enable him to either stop being abusive or walk away from the relationship. Broncos handled this whole situation shabbily and unprofessionally. The Broncos ignored and allowed Mr. Marshall's behavior to go on for 3 years unchecked with no interest in the safety or well-being of my daughter. I hold the Broncos accountable and maintain that they were a contributing factor to the ongoing abuse because of their lack of genuine concern in regard to Brandon's behavior and for their total disregard for Rashida in her life. I told him that I was troubled with the fact that he, the Commissioner, Goodell, had completed his investigation and given out his penalty without no contact with the victim or her family whatsoever. I told him that I was not quite sure how his office conducted an investigation without any contact with the victim, her attorney, her family, or any witnesses to this abuse. I stated that it did not seem that he was upset about the injuries or abuse to the victim, but instead seemed only to be concerned with how the NFL had been victimized by all the publicity. Brandon Marshall has all of the charm of exactly what the team represents, the Broncos. He was, in my opinion, an out-of-control, buck-wild, unbridled Bronco. I let Commissioner know that I thought that he, along with the Broncos, had treated Rashida unfairly and had lightly penalized Mr. Marshall after a one-sided, incomplete investigation. It was just mystifying that with all the evidence, witnesses, pictures, police reports, and everything else that existed in Rashida's case, that he reached this conclusion that he did. I am a former football player as well as a father. I'm appalled by Commissioner Goodell's behavior in my daughter's case. I now believe that Commissioner Goodell should resign and that the NFL should adopt Mrs. Allred's suggestion for a fairer process in order to protect victims of violence by NFL players. Thank you.
Okay, we'll be happy to take a few questions.
Why isn't Ms. Your daughter coming forward today? Is there a reason she's not here, or?
She's just not here. It's my understanding she's not commenting and is not interested in doing any interviews.
Is she aware that y'all are coming forward on her behalf today?
We don't have any comment on that.
And why now after all these years?
Our focus is on the process, and we want the process to be fairer. We want the investigation that is conducted in the future, investigations of NFL players, to afford due process to victims as well as to NFL players. And based on what Mr. Whatley and Ms. Spivey have indicated, the investigation process is not fair and does not appear to afford due process, and does not afford due process to victims. If they're not even contacted, if their statements are not even taken, if they're not permitted to testify or make any statement during the process, then how can the NFL make appropriate decisions? I mean, it appears that it's a whitewash. And that's a kind statement.
Did Atlanta police interview Ms. Spivey? Was Mr. Marshall arresting her?
Was he arrested for the allegation of ramming your car? And your allegation that he threw a rock?
He left before the police arrived.
But did they take their
Police
statement?
report?
Yes, the police report was filed.
And what became of it?
Was he prosecuted for that?
Nothing became of it,
So in other words, to your knowledge, he was not prosecuted?
no.
But that's on Atlanta police more so than the NFL.
Well, let me just say, I do have a lot of experience with Title IX cases, and that's why I mentioned that process, because as many of you know, if you Google me, you'll see that I have, for example, recently settled a case with the University of Connecticut on behalf of rape and sexual assault victims. Again, under Title IX, a college has a duty to provide a fair process, a hearing process, investigation, and afford due process to the victim as well as the accused. And that's whether or not there's ever an arrest, whether or not there's even a report to the police, whether or not there's a prosecution, whether or not there's a conviction, or whether or not there's an acquittal. That's a whole separate duty that colleges and universities, anyone who receives any federal funding as an institution of higher learning, or for that matter, any school has if they receive federal funding. So that is not a legal requirement for the NFL to follow, but I am proposing that that process, which is in place, which is mandated and spelled out by the Office of Civil Rights, United States Department of Education, would be a process that they could look to as a model for how to do a hearing. And the Players Union should also review that process, because the present process is obviously not fair.
When Mr. Marshall went to trial in August of 2009, the jury here in Atlanta acquitted him of battery charges, and a civil suit that was brought against him by Ms. Whatley was dismissed in 2012. So he did go through the legal process, and a jury, and then ultimately the civil case, were both thrown out. What are you hoping to, if the NFL saw that, why would they not keep him in? I mean, where was he ever adjudicated?
I do not and have not represented Rashida at all. And I can only say that, to the best of my knowledge, having reviewed public documents, it appears that he was not prosecuted for everything that is alleged, but he was acquitted in that criminal case on the charge that was brought. Nonetheless, again, as I say, it is not necessary, nor frankly do I consider it even relevant whether or not he is acquitted in a criminal case of a charge which was brought against him or charges. I say that because the burden in a criminal case is to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, for example, for the Title IX hearings that I just talked about, that is not the burden to prove. It is the preponderance of evidence, which is a lot less proof that needs to be adduced in order to find that someone is responsible as opposed to guilty of the acts that are alleged. So, and also, hearings should be conducted in a timely manner. Often criminal cases go on and on and on. There should not be a delay in the NFL's investigation of a case awaiting the outcome of a criminal case. Because, the old saying that justice delayed is justice denied is very true. So likewise, with the Title IX cases, not only should they not wait, but they don't wait to conduct such hearings, because those criminal cases could take years to be resolved. In reference to the civil case that you mentioned, again, I don't represent her. I haven't reviewed that. I'll just tell you my experience having practiced law for 38 years doing civil cases in California and some in New York, where I'm also licensed. Many cases that are filed as civil cases end in dismissals. That does not mean that that's a statement that there was no merit in the case when it was filed, nor does it mean that it doesn't mean anything except that for some reason the plaintiff has decided to dismiss the case. There are many, many reasons why there are dismissals. In many cases, cases are settled. I'm not saying that happened in Rashida's case. Again, I don't represent her. I have no knowledge, and I'm not speaking for her or on her behalf. So I'm just saying that is not, because a case is dismissed, that doesn't mean there was no merit in the first place. Often cases are dismissed.
You are not representing Rashida Watley, so this is all hearsay. I mean, you don't have the person this happened to. Isn't that a big problem? It's a big hole in the case.
First of all, it's not a case. And secondly, there's no hole. I do not need to represent Rashida. We have here Ms. Spivey, who has just described to you what she was present for when she alleges the acts that the NFL player inflicted on her while she was in a car. In addition, we have Mr. Watley, who has spoken about his efforts to contact Mr. Goodell, Commissioner Goodell. So that is what we have stated today.
Why are we here today?
Also, there are many public records which are available to all of you.
Do you talk directly to the commissioners?
No, he didn't. He did not. He sent the letter to which he never received a response. He would have been happy to speak to investigators for the NFL if only the NFL had contacted him, responded to his letter, or even before he sent the letter, contacted him to determine if he had any relevant evidence to offer. It did not happen. As to Ms. Spivey, she indicated that she did in fact speak to Mr. Goodell, that he said he would get back to her, that he never did.
Do y'all have copies of the letters y'all sent to Goodell available to the media?
I have seen a copy of the letter that was sent. However, it is not going to be released by Mr. Watley. He has spoken about some of what was in his letter. He's not going to release the rest of the letter, but it's clear what his feelings are.
And Christina's email?
Pardon me?
Christina said she emailed the commissioner. We would be releasing that.
I don't know. She'll have to think about that.
So if you don't represent Ms. Watley, can you explain the nature of your professional relationship with Mr. Watley and Ms. Spivey and
Yes.
what you were seeking on their behalf?
Yes, happy to do so. I don't represent Mr. Watley or Ms. Spivey, but they are concerned about how victims have been treated by the NFL. They would like victims in the future not to have to suffer what they suffered in terms of their treatment and in terms of their belief and experience that there was not a full, fair, and speedy investigation of their allegations. So that's their purpose. We're not looking at a lawsuit. We're not looking at a claim. We are working to improve the process, and that is what we seek.
What do you guys want to have?
Yes, sir? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your question, then I'll take yours.
Two parts. What is it that what's the bottom line of what you guys want the NFL or Mr. Goodell to do? I know the gentleman said he wants Mr. Goodell to resign, but what else do you want? The second is, why today versus not speaking out a year ago, 2 years ago?
Well, there are two parts of it. Yes, I think resignation makes sense. But more than that, we want a process, a hearing process in the future that really affords due process to victims. That's what this is all about. Because no matter who the NFL commissioner is, unless there is a fair hearing process, nothing will change. And that is what is important. There is a great deal of feeling of intimidation by many victims and members of victims' families, because others have also contacted me. I'm not going to say who, because that will be in confidence. And there needs to be a process where Commissioner Goodell reaches out and really does a fair investigation. That is really our point. I'm sorry, what was the other part of your question, sir?
Why today versus not speaking out a year ago, 2 years ago?
Well, actually, they did do interviews about the allegations about the NFL player some years ago.
And what brings your involvement?
My involvement is because they contacted me, because they know that I care about victims' rights, and I'm not intimidated. And this is what I've been doing for the last 38 years, is helping victims to have a voice and helping to improve the justice system within organizations, within the law, and helping them to become empowered. And so I'm so proud of them, because it's a frightening experience for them. Yes, sir.
The NFL standard should be separate from the civil and criminal court system. How do they determine some sort of basis for action separate from the court?
It's easily done. If they look at the Title IX hearing process model in colleges and universities, this happens all the time. For example, I've been involved representing some victims in colleges where there's a hearing process. The victims are able to speak or testify during that hearing the college conducts itself. The perpetrator, that is the accused, can also speak or not speak, depending on what he chooses to do. At the end of that hearing process, the college makes a finding. The accused is responsible for unconsented to sexual intercourse, for example, if that's the allegation. He's responsible. And then if he's found to be responsible, as opposed to guilty, which is a term for a criminal case, if he is found to be responsible, then there are certain punishments or disciplines or sanctions that follow. For example, he may be expelled. He may be suspended. There are no contact orders that are issued. There are various sanctions that are put in place. And that's what happens. And it's happening every day throughout this country in many colleges and universities. Where it's failing to happen, sometimes we're bringing lawsuits. And sometimes legislatures are looking into what should happen, as happened when I did a news conference originally in Connecticut with some rape and sexual assault victims and made allegations about the University of Connecticut and their process. The governor and the heads of the legislature were immediately sensitive and responsive and called for a legislative hearing, and a bill ultimately was passed as a result of all that, and we settled it. And I think that Connecticut has a lot to be proud of, and the University of Connecticut has a lot to be proud of for working in a positive way, so that everyone was involved in a win-win situation. So it can happen. It does happen. Is there a will for it to happen in the NFL? I guess that remains to be seen.
NFL commissioner or a team owner, you're, in your way of thinking, you can't say, well, we're going to wait for the legal process to take its course before we decide what to do.
Well, you know, the NFL can say whatever it wants, but we know the truth. The truth is that they also have a standard of conduct, a morals clause or a standard of conduct in the NFL. And this affects their brand, and they take action where it's appropriate. I mean, they just did with Adrian Peterson. After he was going to be suspended, then he wasn't going to be suspended, and then he's back, and then he's not back. Okay, well now, he's not, at least for a temporary period of time. And the criminal case has not reached a conclusion. He's been indicted. There has not yet been a trial. We don't know when there will be a trial, because we know that sometimes criminal justice system has a glacial pace. But pending the outcome, the NFL realizes, wait, we better take some action. These are serious felony allegations. Not that I think it has to amount to a felony, but in that case it is. Felony allegations, felony charges. I might add that I just want to say something about the Radisson. It's not just a weird coincidence that I chose to do this here. The Radisson felt that it obviously was serious as well, and therefore they temporarily suspended their sponsorship or partnership with the NFL or the Vikings over it, and I commend them for caring about children and erring on the side of caution and doing that. So I think that's great for the Radisson. That's why I decided to do it here. And I'd like to see other sponsors, you know, make appropriate decisions as well, because children's lives matter, women's lives matter, and we should not wait for the outcome of criminal process to take some action when serious charges are made.
And in this case that you talked about, the decision to give him a one-game suspension or reduce it, wasn't that made before this was adjudicated?
I couldn't hear your question.
Wasn't that decision made before this was adjudicated on the suspension of one game?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but given the allegations, given the inadequate, incomplete investigation, might it have amounted to more had they done a true investigation instead of a sham investigation, instead of a one-sided investigation, instead of what appears to be a half-hearted investigation? I guess we'll never know what they would have done, but we'd like them to do better in the future. I'm sorry, would you like to add something?
I'm sorry, and just that wasn't the only incident, and there were several. So it's not something that they weren't aware of. It happened in many states between Rashida and Brandon, from Puerto Rico to Denver to Florida to Georgia. So when there are that many instances where something is happening, where there's smoke, there's fire. So that's just, it just seems obvious that someone would take a look into it, even if they don't believe that that's the case. You should investigate it.
And to your knowledge, were police reports filed in were police reports made in other states?
And the other police reports, most of them are one-sided, and they state that Brendan left the scene before anything could ever come up.
But in other states,
yes, there
other
are
police reports.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Christina, are you still friends with Rashida?
Yes.
Why is she not here today?
Well, she's not commenting on why she's not here. Rashida is not here. She does not wish to do any interviews, is my understanding.
No disrespect to the
And she has no legal duty to come to a press conference. Pardon me?
You don't represent her legally. Can't you give her a chance to explain why Rashida isn't here?
Well, that's her answer.
Is it your answer?
No comment.
Has Brandon or his team, the Chicago Bears, been notified of this press conference today?
I wouldn't be surprised if members of the press notified him. I don't have any knowledge one way or another. Brandon doesn't give me notice of when he's making a statement to the press. I don't feel under any obligation to give him notice of when I intend to do so.
What would you like to see happen to Brandon?
This issue is so much bigger than Brandon Marshall.
But he's the one that seems to committed the crime.
Well, this issue is about the NFL and what it needs to do. in the future.
So if you don't get the response that you want from the NFL, is there a lawsuit planned?
No,
So no damages are being sought out?
that's correct.
To that point.
We just want, as I think it was someone from the Vikings this morning said, to get it right. We want the NFL to get it right. It's long overdue for the NFL to get it right. And let's have them get it right. Now, in terms of the hearing process, they need to be accountable to the public.
Do you think Mr. Goodell is redeemable, or do you feel like he needs to go? It seems like I'm hearing both from you today.
I mean, I think he should resign because of the way the investigations appear to have been conducted in the past. But unless the hearing process is changed, unless there's a requirement that each and every witness, each and every victim is contacted ASAP for their statements and included in an investigative report and included in a hearing, nothing will change, even if there's a new NFL commissioner. And that's why, I mean, it's easy just to say, off with his head, and fine, I'm in favor of his resignation, but I do not think that alone will solve the problem unless they're willing to do a better job in the process of having a hearing. That's the part that you all generally don't hear about. How was that hearing conducted? Who was interviewed? Did they have all the evidence, really, or just the evidence from the NFL player or whatever happened to land in the newspapers or on the internet?
How many victims do you think are out there who haven't been heard from?
My guess, and it's just a guess, is many, and there are many reasons they don't speak up. Some of them would include the following. Some are members of the NFL players' family, and they are socialized to believe that if they do anything or speak the truth to power, namely the NFL, that will somehow ruin the player's career, their future will be ruined, and it's because their fault, not the batterer's fault, that the children that they have with them will be hurt because their economic future will be changed, that it will be all the fault of the person who told the truth, namely the victim. So I know the NFL wants to provide victim services and counseling, and that's all fine. My guess is they'd like to keep it within the NFL family. Let those victims know they have a right to seek advice and counsel outside of the NFL to find out what their real options are and what they can and should do if they are the victim of violence by an NFL member. And those of us who don't even know them have a duty to speak out for them, because many of them, in a sense, are unable to do so for a lot of reasons. Sometimes cases are settled and they can't speak. There's lots of reasons that people don't speak out. Sometimes they're afraid, they just don't want to, even if they can. We don't know.
But you sound like you're talking about current wives.
I'm talking about wives in the past, present wives, future wives, significant others, baby mamas, you name it. We know the culture. We know what exists. We know the reality. People here often know the reality.
Ms. Spivey and Mr. Watley, given that court cases have already been adjudicated, what do you think, if anything, should be the penalty to Mr. Marshall at this point?
Actually, I think there's only one case that's been adjudicated.
Well, are there any others pending?
I don't know. You said cases. That's why I...
Yeah, the civil and the criminal.
Pardon me? Oh, you were talking about both?
Yes.
Okay.
Are there any others pending?
Not that I don't have any knowledge of, but then again, I don't represent her.
The question stands. What do y'all think, if anything, should be the penalty for Mr. Marshall at this point?
Let me move over to the mics.
I'm not sure of exactly a penalty. You know, I've thought about this and pondered here, you know, over the last couple months, especially since the Ray Rice whole issues come up. I don't think that past victims, and this is the concern that I really have, is that past victims just be forgotten. You know, I hear people going around saying people change, people take classes, they get therapy, and they're not the same person. That's all fine and dandy, but my concern is the victims. You know, I'm glad that some of these guys are getting their head cleared out, and getting some treatment, and getting and understanding how they have to conduct themselves, but it doesn't dismiss the damage that's been done to those people that got run over, beat up, abused by these fellas. I hope that the NFL will take a look and say, you know, we got to have some kind of guidelines to work in here. Maybe it was 3 or 4 years ago that this guy beat this girl up. Does it make it any worse than if it happened today? To me, when it happened to my daughter, I still feel the pain of it right now today. Listening to Christina reading that story made me choke. I relived it, I revisited it. I've seen her puffy face, I've seen her leg, I've seen the bruises on her, and so it's difficult. And I went through a period for about 2+ years dealing with the Broncos and their security team. At the time it was Mr. Dave Abrams I was speaking with, and we talked about these issues. So it wasn't like the commissioner was in the dark about what was going on with Brandon Marshall and my daughter. You know, between the Broncos, myself, and corresponding back and forth, there's no way in the world he could be out of the loop on that many instances. That's the thing that was just driving us crazy. Not 1 or 2, there was 3, 4, 5, 6 different police reports with the same type of behavior, and we couldn't get anybody to pay attention to what was going on.
By the way, you used to play college ball for whom?
I played for college, Adams State College, way back in the day. It's a small college in Colorado, southern part of Colorado. And I also actually had a tryout with the Broncos back a long time ago. And it's just funny how things have kind of come full circle. But it was tough. You know, I thought that I kind of got over a lot of that stuff. Hearing Christina speak on it again, it's just like it just happened yesterday. It just rips you wide open. And I can't explain to you how frustrating it is for a father to see his daughter battered, bruised, and see these men, and this is basically men who are making these decisions. There's not women sitting at these tables saying, hey, you know, this girl's got a black eye. You know, these men are just, they don't care. They didn't care at that time. I don't know what their thinking is today, but at the time we were dealing with this, they just didn't care. It wasn't important enough. No matter how much I hammered and called, and I did my very best to keep my cool, be patient. And now we have an opportunity where this thing has come up again. And I think what happened to my daughter, which has happened to any woman that's going through this now, it's abuse. I don't care how you slice it. If it was 6 months ago, if it was 5 years ago, and these guys are still active, I think someone needs to address the fact that we just can't dismiss that this problem happened 5 years or 4 years ago, that we're going to let them guys get out of this unscathed. I think that the public needs to be aware that, yeah, I'm glad these guys are making changes, but hey, my daughter's got scars. She's got a nasty scar on her thigh right now from dealing with Brandon Marshall. I've seen the bruises on her face. I went to court. I heard the testimony. It was enough to make me gag. And so I'm here with Gloria and Miss Spivey because I'm a supporter for women. I'm tired of how women get pushed around, get neglected. Just not in the football arena, just period. You know, women are just treated just horrible. Men ought to feel bad. We got to look in the mirror and say, man, we need to man up and do something better as men to stop this violence, stop this beating up on women, stop this verbal abuse, putting women down. You know, I just heard a football player, ex-football player, the other night say something about it. It's time for the NFL to grow up and for men to stand up. I've been waiting a long time for men to stand up. And when I was standing up by myself, just my family, just us, rocks thrown at us, people call my daughter's names and she's a gold digger and you guys are, I could give a hoot. I told that kid when he came out of college, I said, son, I'm glad for you for 2 things. You got a college degree and you don't have to stay at home with mama. You can actually have a job and go to work. As far as football is concerned, I said, it doesn't impress me. I don't care about the NFL. I don't care about your football career. I care about my daughter being safe and being happy. You've been an NFL player, that's just it's a sidekick. It doesn't mean that much to me. So I'm trying not to get too wound up about this because it's been a long time pulling this stuff in.
Well, I love it. I think what he said is very important. We're going to take one more question. The only thing I would add to what he's...
Diagnosed with borderline personality disorder.
Pardon me?
Psychiatric illness. What do you say to Marshall being diagnosed with a borderline personality disorder? He underwent treatment and he has not had any incidents of violence since then.
Okay, we have no comment on his psychological state at all. The only thing I would add to Mr. Watley, maybe it's time for men to women up instead of man up. But anyway, thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it, and we look forward to Mr. Goodell's response. I'll be sending him a copy of my statement, and I'll have a letter that's being sent from my office to him today. We'll let you know if, as, and when he responds. Thank you.
Mr. Wallace, the NFL can only suspend Brandon Marshall having stopped playing football.
So speaking from the Radisson Hotel in Atlanta, Gloria Allred, attorney, president of the Women's Equal Rights Legal Defense and Education Fund, speaking with two individuals who allege that they were victims, or a family member was a victim of violence and abuse by an NFL player. Well, this concludes this special Fox 5 Live broadcast. We will have continuing clips of today's press conference on our Fox 5 Atlanta YouTube page, and certainly invite you to join us for continuing coverage of this story on myfoxatlanta.com.